Good afternoon, dear friends. I am Evely, and today I will tell you a true story. Enjoy your viewing. It began quietly, as all the worst things do. The first reports were nothing more than vague whispers from across the country, the kind of stories you dismiss as urban legends or misunderstood rumors. But within days, the rumors became facts, and the facts became nightmares. It was a virus, though no one knew what caused it or where it came from. The early cases were strange. A dog suddenly lunging at its owner, a cat attacking a bird in its cage, a hamster gnawing at its own reflection with frantic, unrelenting aggression. The animals weren't just violent. They were changed. Their behavior was erratic, unpredictable, and deadly. At first, people chalked it up to some kind of bizarre epidemic affecting only pets. But it didn't take long for the situation to spiral out of control. The virus spread rapidly, and it only affected pets, dogs, cats, rabbits, birds, even reptiles. There were no signs of it affecting humans, but those who lived with the infected animals weren't as lucky. What began as isolated incidents soon became a full-scale epidemic. The infected pets didn't just attack other animals, they attacked each other. Their instinct to survive turned into an insatiable hunger, as if a new, darker force was controlling them. In a small suburban neighborhood, Sarah and her family were the first to experience the horror up close. Their golden retriever, Max, was the first to show signs of the infection. He had always been a gentle, playful dog, but one evening, something changed. He growled at his own reflection in the window, then snapped at the family's pet rabbit, Fluff. Before Sarah could intervene, Max had bitten the rabbit, tearing into its soft fur with horrifying speed. The family tried to pull him away, but it was too late. Fluff was dead, and Max's eyes, those once warm brown eyes, now glowed with an unnatural hunger. Sarah's husband, Mark, did what any pet owner would do in that moment. He tried to calm Max, tried to snap him out of whatever was happening. But Max wasn't the dog he had once been. He lunged at Mark, teeth sinking into his arm, and the man screamed in pain. In desperation, Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed at the dog, but the animal didn't even flinch. Max simply kept attacking, his jaws snapping, his growls growing more guttural and violent. Mark managed to break free, but the damage was done. He could feel the infection taking root, the fever setting in, the blood pulsing with the same hunger Max had shown. The family barricaded themselves in the kitchen, and that's when the true horror began. The infection didn't just turn animals into mindless killers. It began to fuse them together. The virus was mutating, and the once dominant pets were becoming parts of a larger, grotesque amalgamation. Sarah watched in horror as the pets of their neighbors, once familiar and beloved, began to move together in strange, unnatural ways. Max wasn't just a dog anymore. His body was stretching and warping, as if other animals were being absorbed into him, merging with him into a writhing mass of flesh and bone. As the virus spread to the other animals in the neighborhood, their once separate forms melded into an incomprehensible, monstrous creature. Cats, dogs, even the neighbor's parrot, all twisted into one single organism, an abomination of flesh that pulsed with a dark energy. That night, the mass came for Sarah's family. Mark, his body now infected, became one with the horror, dragged into the writhing mass like a puppet on a string. Sarah screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of the gnashing of teeth, the squelching of shifting flesh. She tried to run, but the house was already surrounded by the infected. She could see the neighbors, once friendly faces, now distorted beyond recognition, their bodies morphing into a disgusting blend of fur, feathers, and twisted limbs. They moved in a mass, undulating like an army of hunger, taking everything in their path. Sarah fought back with what little she had, pots, pans, even a broken chair, but it was useless. The mass of infected animals, once pets, now something far worse, was relentless. She could feel it closing in around her, its cold, sticky presence pressing against her every move. She had nowhere to go. In another town, a young couple named Emily and Jason tried to escape the chaos. They had heard rumors of the infected animals, but like everyone else, They thought it was just some strange local issue. That was until their own cat, Whiskers, started acting strange. Emily first noticed it when she found Whiskers staring at her with wide, unblinking eyes, its fur matted and wet. At first, she thought it had gotten into something, but then, the cat began to twitch. It wasn't long before Whiskers attacked their other pets, a hamster, a pair of parakeets, and began tearing into their cages with savage determination. Emily and Jason didn't know what to do. They tried to call a vet, but the lines were down. No one was answering. The infection had spread too far. Desperate to escape, Emily and Jason fled to the outskirts of town, thinking the infection hadn't reached that far yet. They thought they were safe, but as they drove through the woods, they saw the first signs of what the virus had truly become. Animals, wild animals, were infected now, too. Deer, rabbits, even raccoons, all attacking each other in a frenzy, their bodies beginning to twist and contort as they fought for dominance. Emily and Jason tried to outrun the horror, but it was everywhere. The infected animals had taken over the land, and the virus was mutating, turning them into creatures no one could recognize. Jason's car was ambushed by a herd of infected deer. The animals had become something more than wild beasts. They were twisted, savage versions of their former selves. The deer tore through the car, dragging Jason and Emily out into the night. Emily managed to escape, but only for a moment. She ran through the woods, her heart pounding in her chest. The virus was everywhere now. The pets, the wild animals, nothing was safe. The twisted creatures were closing in, their bodies shifting and warping as they turned into something monstrous. The world was descending into chaos, and there was no way to stop it. In the distance, Emily heard a sound, something that sent a chill down her spine. It was the sound of countless animals, all moving together in unison, like a great storm of flesh. The virus was no longer just spreading through pets. It had evolved. It was consuming everything, and there was no escape. As the days dragged on, the infection spread like wildfire, leaving entire towns abandoned in its wake. Emily had learned to survive by instinct alone, avoiding the cities, sticking to the dense forests, and seeking shelter wherever she could. But the world had changed. No place was untouched anymore. No home was safe, and the virus, now a global scourge, was only growing stronger, its insidious nature evolving in ways no one could have predicted. Emily had no choice but to keep moving, hoping against hope that some semblance of humanity still existed. She made her way toward the mountains, where rumors told of a safe haven, an isolated compound that had remained untouched by the plague. The journey was perilous. The creatures were everywhere, hunting, consuming, merging into grotesque masses that defied all logic and reason. Yet, Emily clung to that fragile hope, unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. One night, after days of travel, Emily reached the base of the mountains. The dark silhouette of a structure stood in the distance, flickering lights suggesting that some survivors, still inhabited it. She pushed herself onward, her legs aching, her throat dry, but she refused to stop. The compound had to be her salvation, the only refuge left in the dying world. But as she drew closer, a sense of unease washed over her. There was something wrong. The air was thick with an unnatural silence, the kind that only comes when a place has been abandoned long ago. The lights were sporadic, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. She hesitated but then forced herself to keep going, a primal fear gnawing at her stomach. As she approached the compound, she saw the first signs that it had once been a stronghold for those trying to survive. Barricades, barbed wire, hastily written warnings on the walls. But the place was still, too still. And then, she heard it, a soft, faint noise at first, like the distant echo of a heartbeat. But it grew louder, closer. The unmistakable sound of a horde, a writhing, pulsating mass of infected animals. They were here and they were coming fast. In her panic, Emily found herself retreating into a nearby shed, but it was useless. The infected were everywhere, creeping through the underbrush, their sickly forms shifting as they melded together in a grotesque display of hunger. The virus was no longer confined to pets. It had spread to the wild animals, the birds, even the insects. A nightmarish fusion of species had taken over the land, and now they had set their sights on the last known survivors. Emily's heart raced as the ground beneath her trembled with the weight of the mass drawing nearer. She could hear their grotesque chittering, the sound of bones cracking as the twisted creatures grew stronger. The infection had evolved, and now it was building itself into something far worse than anyone could have ever imagined. What had once been separate bodies were now an amalgamation of flesh and bone, an all-consuming monstrosity that was devouring everything in its path. She needed to find a way out. With no other choice, Emily crawled out from the shed and ran toward the compound, her legs burning with exhaustion. The gates were still open, but the guards, if there had been any, were long gone. She entered the compound, heart pounding, and found herself inside the main building. It was eerily quiet, with nothing but the distant sound of the mass closing in. The compound was a fortress, built to withstand attacks, but now it felt like a tomb. Inside, she found evidence of the people who had once lived there. Scattered belongings, half-eaten meals, bloodstains on the walls. There had been a struggle, but they were gone now, replaced by the ever-encroaching infection. Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of their deaths pressing down on her. It wasn't just the animals anymore. The infected were changing the very fabric of life, altering the balance of nature itself. As she wandered deeper into the compound, a soft, hollow cry reached her ears. It was human. Emily's heart leaped as she followed the sound, only to find a man, hunched over in the corner of a small room, his body trembling with fever. His eyes were glazed, his skin pale and mottled. He had been bitten, infected, and yet, he clung to life with a desperation that mirrored Emily's own. I thought I could fight it. I thought I could survive," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He was feverish, delirious. "But it's everywhere. It's in everything. The pets, the animals. They're all becoming one." Emily knew what he meant. The mass, the creatures, the virus. In a moment of grim clarity, she understood that there was no escape. The infection wasn't just a plague. It was a transformation, a world-altering event that was reshaping life as they knew it. The once separate animals, humans, even the earth itself, were merging into one horrific entity, a force too powerful to stop. The man's eyes widened as he turned to her, a look of pleading in his expression. "It's coming. They're coming for us. It's too late. We can't fight it anymore." Before Emily could respond, the compound door slammed open with a deafening crash. The sound of countless bodies, twisted and deformed, surged into the building. The infected mass had arrived. Emily scrambled toward the back exit, her mind racing for any possible way out. But there was no time. The mass was upon them, its bodies merging into a shifting tide of fur, scales, and twisted limbs. The door she had hoped would be her salvation slammed shut as the creatures advanced, a horrific blend of hunger and rage. In the chaos, Emily's vision blurred, her body consumed by a sense of dread, so intense it threatened to tear her apart. The walls around her vibrated with the sound of gnashing teeth, the squelching of bodies, and the terrible realization that there was no hope. The infection had won. The last thing she saw before she was swallowed by the mass was the man beside her. His body, now part of the monstrosity, merging with the rest of the creatures. And then darkness. The world had fallen. The pets, their innocent eyes once filled with affection, had become the monsters of their own creation. And the humans? They were no longer the dominant species. They were nothing more than food for the ravenous, ever-growing mass. The virus had claimed everything, and with it, the world was consumed. Forever. Thank you for watching. Support me with a like and a subscribe. Thank you. See you in another video. Bye.